that my mother had born to her equals a dot. What is it, Trent?
Yo, man, that's the formula.
Yo, yo, yo. Formula episode 5.
Episode 5, here we go.
How we
Wait,
doing?
it's been 5 already? It's been 5 weeks? That's crazy.
I know. It's crazy to think about even where we were 5 weeks ago. I'm now back in Florida, which is crazy, but
Yeah.
we've done it. Today's a Tuesday, and I think the past few weeks we've been consistent on Mondays. Obviously, we had to push this one back a day, but the consistency's crazy. Like, even
Yeah.
just thinking about what was happening, I don't even know in that first Florida episode, had you even gotten reached out to by Salesforce?
I think they no, I don't think I had yet. They may have just reached out to me and I had done the first interview, but I don't think I had really I don't think I even brought it up on the podcast.
Yeah, that's so crazy. And then like a week separated, we're talking about now you're fired up, now you're ready to do it, now you're interested, now you want to get the job.
Yeah,
It's crazy how
exactly.
that works.
Yeah. It was interesting listening to all them, but tell us about what you got going on. I know you're in Florida again. What's been happening with you?
Yeah, this trip's been great. This one is a few days longer than the last one. This is a full week this time, and today's actually our last day here. So we fly out tonight. We board at I think 7 or something, so it's gonna be a late night that we get home.
Yeah.
But this trip's been great. I had Caroline text me because I was like, "What the hell have we been up to?" I know I'm gonna have to talk about some of this stuff on the podcast, but similar to the last trip, we haven't been doing a ton. It's been more leisure than, running around and doing any touristy things. I think we've both done the Florida thing in general enough times that there's not a lot
Yeah.
of new attraction. I've never personally been. We're just under Naples, Florida, in a town called Bonita Springs,
Nice.
and her dad and stepmom have a place that's in a gated community. If you can see in the background, we're right on the golf course for Bonita Bay's Country Club. So I've been sitting out here and watching people hit their approach shots onto the green here, which has been fun for me. But this has been a super relaxing one. I know with my last trip, we talked about it's tough, especially in this stage in my career, taking time to just do myself,
Yeah.
if that's the best way to word it, but to just take some time just to kick back and kick the feet up and
Yeah.
not feel pressed to do work. And it's tough because, taking time away means that work still has to be came back to.
Yeah.
So trying to really unplug and get out of my head and allow myself to just relax is pretty tough for me. But
Hmm.
since I got to do it earlier this month, I got a little bit of that. And then coming into this, you know, I have to force it a little less just because, I mean, I work hard enough. I feel like I deserve to take vacations like this, which is hard for me to convince myself of.
Yeah.
But yeah, we haven't been doing a whole lot. We've been doing some shopping. We spent the day at the beach on Friday. I was telling Caroline they are members of a different beach club that is super, super nice. And it's the first
Hmm.
time I've ever been to the beach that I've had a chair and a towel and like someone serving me and things. I feel like every time I've been to the beach prior, it's been like, you go into the water, you dry off, you like lay on your wet towel in the sand and it's just uncomfy. So
Yeah.
this has been a good change of pace, or that was a good change of pace just to like, we had a
You're becoming
abundance
more
of towels.
domesticated.
Yeah, I mean honestly, I don't know. It's like a new thing for me to
Yeah.
not have to deal with some of those things. So that was nice. And like I said, doing some shopping, eating
Yeah.
good, going out in Bonita Bay a bit, and then just kind of laying low otherwise, which I've appreciated.
Yeah. So with this being your first time there, do you really like the town too? Tell us about the town.
Yeah, Bonita Bay is cool. Like I think they got hit pretty hard during the hurricanes,
Yeah.
so there's been a lot of rebuilding. And then Caroline's stepmom grew up around this area, and her mom and dad both had a place around this area. So it's
Oh,
been cool to
nice.
hear stories about how it's changed over time. And
Hmm.
where we went one night, it was in an area of Bonita Bay called like Old Bonita, I think. or Old
Yeah.
Town or something they called it.
Hmm.
And they had added some stuff in since that she was telling us about weren't that wasn't there when she was growing up. There was like a place that had a big rooftop. There was this place that was outside that had a bunch of food trucks parked and live music, and so
Yeah.
it was cool to hear the stories about how it's changed over time. But Fort Lauderdale is where I'm used to, and it's completely different, which I thought is
Hmm.
interesting. I mean, I think Florida is still Florida to some extent. Like the weather's been similar. It's hot. It's super, super hot, like mid to high 80s every day that we've been here.
Nice.
And which I love. Like I have no complaints about. Like we did some runs and then we played tennis last night and it's, 10 minutes outside and you're just drenched. But the town's been cool. I think it's a little bit of a older town.
Yeah. Yeah.
Caroline and I
Naples
think are
and
definitely
Marco
the mind.
are
What's
right
that?
there. And I said Naples and Marco are right there, and those are both. I've been there and old. I remember I got yelled at as a kid for walking across the street by myself, even like,
Yeah. Yeah, and we've explored like towns around us too. Um, that are like ritzier and they seem to have like a little bit of a younger crowd. But yeah, I don't know, man. Naples seems cool. Either way, it's a vacation. I'm kicking my feet up. So the
yeah,
touristy stuff or what the town brings don't really play as big of a role to me, at least on these types of trips. So
gotcha. Gotcha. Nice.
what about
Sounds
you?
fun.
I know in Green Bay the draft was this past weekend. You were back in Green Bay to do some work at the restaurant, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I took off basically now a week and a half. I start tomorrow with
At the new job.
Salesforce. Yeah,
Yeah,
but so I started off just like felt like my life was in shambles with like spring cleaning I needed to get done and rearranging my whole life. And so I did that before I left. Redid my bookcase, dusted everything. Oh my gosh, until you dust, you don't realize how dirty your house is. So
100%.
did that, just did all these things to like make myself feel better about my environment and feel more put together. Because after a while, it just gets to be a mess and you're looking around, you're like, what's happening? So did that. And then, yeah, we went to Green Bay for the draft, which was awesome. The draft was very cool. Was very surprising though, like, and I know this is intentional probably by the NFL, was just to keep everybody in the area that where the draft was because they basically blocked off like, I don't know, 6 blocks or it was a pretty large space that they blocked off specifically for the draft. Um, so like the restaurant wasn't even full at all. It was actually less people than what would be on a regular weekday, considering they had, double the population just on the property of Lambeau. And so it was disappointing in that sense. One day though, we didn't have to work on, I think it was Saturday night, so we got to go experience what was going on. They had like a Brad Paisley concert going on. So it was cool. It was fun. We got to hang out with my family and Steph's family and do that together too, which doesn't always happen that often. And it was really nice I like when they interact together. They're both really good people. So it was fun, but I
Do you
came
want
back
to
Sunday.
Sorry, I just was gonna say, do you want to kind of explain the vibe of the restaurant and even maybe like shout it out a bit? Like I don't know what I
Yeah.
expected when I first came there, but I was super impressed when I saw it for the first time.
Yeah, for sure. So it's more of one of like the fine dining areas in Green Bay. It's right on the water. So it's the biggest location on the water. It's called the OC. Um, but in the summer it's the best because they have a patio that's on the river too, like in this little marina. It's beautiful there. And they have an outdoor bar right there too. So that's and oh, and now they have boat slips too. So you can come on your boat as well. The
Damn.
person that was owning the marina sold it finally, and now that new owner was like, "Yeah, we'll give you 3 new slips right away." So it'll be good for business too. But yeah, very elegant, very large. Like it should be like a 2-story building, but it's just open and they have like a plane hanging from the ceiling. They have a boat hanging from the ceiling, a train hanging from the ceiling. very crazy. I don't know, like, how would you explain it, Casey? You've, as someone coming in randomly, I'm there all the time, so
Yeah. I think like the openness is a good call out. Like I was super surprised and impressed just by when you walk in how spacious it is, and then the
yeah,
primary bar that's inside has a cool vibe to it, but then the bar that's outside has a slightly different vibe to it.
yeah.
And I was there at nighttime, which I don't know if that's like I don't know if hours are primarily like afternoon or later in the night, or are they open? Like what time do they typically open?
They're typically open like, I don't know, I think like 11 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah.
But I like being there at night personally. I think it's way cooler at night.
It kind of has like a dim lit, I don't know, like
Mhm.
cool ambiance to it. And yeah, I don't know. I think you guys were getting close to closing when I got there, so I kind of was there as stuff was getting shut down. But I would
Yeah,
love to come back to actually to eat there and
yeah.
like have a couple cocktails. What is the, I mean, I know the answer, but what's like the primary cuisine and vibe of the food that they serve?
Yeah, it's more like a American fine dining. You'll find a mix of different stuff on there, but like the ceviche is insane. The cheese curds are a very different style than most that you'll find in Wisconsin. They're like hand battered that day, and then I really like. I mean, the OC burger's good, but yeah, they do like stone fire pizza too. So lots of options for basically anybody. Steaks are delicious there too. So
And it's owned by your girlfriend Steph's uncle, and how it's like the
yeah.
family association.
Yeah, so it's her uncle, and then it's named after her grandmother, Olivia Cruz. So the OC, Olivia
Mm.
Cruz, and then she's there every day too, as well. So it's a whole family affair. Like you walk in and you're gonna see at least three people that are in the family, or um, one of like Steph's brothers' friends all work at the restaurant too. So it's all like cousins and all these different people. The vibe is great. You know, you feel like the saying is where friends turn into family, which is pretty true. Like if you come there regularly, you get to know how all these different relationships are. And I just love the way that they treat people. I think like at because it's not such like a bar or like a quick let me get your food to you and get you out as soon like they want you to come, they want you to hang out, have drinks, like they have specialty drinks, all these different things. And I think it's interesting how they treat you there, like especially as when I was bartending for them, you're able to talk to people so much more. And all the people are interesting too because it's like right next to all the hotels, so people are traveling, or some of like the financial um buildings in the city too are right there too. So all these people have interesting things to say, and you start to see like people having really good conversations at the bar or with their family. And it's more of a place where you want to come and talk. And
Yeah,
so,
which is a perfect environment for you too. I know you're bartending there, and it sounds like you get some opportunity to chat up some super cool people, and
yeah.
the environment and the association that you have to the people who employ you help with
Mhm.
allowing you to actually have those conversations, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
For sure.
Super dope. I was surprised to hear that it was a little quieter at first around the draft time, but like you said, I suppose it makes sense that they kind of keep people in association in close quarters and are feeding them at the hotels and stuff, so they're not just
Yeah.
out and about in the area maybe as much as you'd think.
Yeah, like the hotels, there's two of them that are right next to the restaurant, and both of them were basically booked out by ESPN. So like I'm guessing ESPN and the hotel had figured out like, okay, because typically with media they have basically a buffet going on all day long that these people can just come in and grab food really quickly. Like the only people that were coming over were the actual analysts. So that was kind of cool. Like Booger was um having coffee, and then 20 minutes later he's on ESPN doing his set, so that's kind of cool. Like forget what the other guy was. So they'd come like once the draft was done, at late at night, they'd come eat quickly with some of the different people. But or before they had to get on TV. So it was an interesting vibe for sure.
That's sweet. Something I wanted to bring back that you had just mentioned when you were talking about preparing for this week and getting ready to start your new job is how much the general organization of your life, the cleanliness of your place, and things like that play into what you feel is your readiness to start a
Yeah.
new job, for example. Do you want to talk a bit more, and I'll give my 2 cents too, but talk a bit more about your process and some of like the internal check boxes that you have in order
Yeah.
to feel like you're ready to take on a new week or a new job in this case?
Yeah, for sure. Um, well, with the winter and like things getting thrown at me, after a while, like Steph and I do cleaning every single Sunday and do the same types of cleaning, but at some point you start to feel like, oh, I'm missing something, like something's out of whack. And it makes me think of the movie Limitless when he like first takes that pill and his apartment's a mess and he cleans the whole place right away. I kind of like have that same feeling where it's like, okay, I need to have all these things make sense to me again. Because like my closet, the the clothes are out of whack. It's all still in the same spots, but it's out of whack. Like the color coding's off, like those types of things. The jackets are in the wrong spots because you have your winter coats in the main section and then like your spring coats in the different section. So it really was just trying to put those pieces back together so that when I'm come home, I don't have to think as much. It's just like, okay, I know this is where this is gonna be. It looks it looks like it's supposed to be there because it is supposed to be there. And so I don't have to have so much guesswork and like trying to figure out where things are. So that's kind of like my thought process with it. And then two, I just have been having a terrible time breathing and I've been trying to figure out what it is. And it's probably because of all the damn dust that's in there. Yeah, I was wearing one last night too. I was gonna wear it on this, but um, but yeah, so that's kind of like my thought process, just like let's eliminate all of the indecisiveness that could be out there. So
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's something that I always think about. I think it plays into my issue with working from home as well. I've worked from home for years and
yeah,
I can't get anything done if all that stuff's not in place. So I often
yeah,
find myself working at coffee shops, which I've struggled with lately because I do like to have my at-home setup. Like I need multiple screens. I like to have a big personal private space for me to work. And sometimes coffee shops, you have to roll the dice on having a plug-in or how noisy it's going to be. And days I have important calls, it's hard for me to take calls and to really dial in if there's other people next to me. But I really struggle working from home sometimes because even if I get up at a decent time, in order for me to get through all the routines I need to get through to feel like my home is organized before I can work, sometimes just lead to overwhelm overwhelmness, lead
overwhelmed.
to lead to being overwhelmed while I'm working. So it's something that I've really tried to figure out, but always try to stay ahead of so that when I start my day, I can eat, I can take a shower, and I can go into my work day instead of having to eat, take a shower, do the dishes, vacuum the floors,
Yeah.
organize my closet or whatever else needs to be done, get some laundry in the wash. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know what the association is because sometimes it's the most random things and things that don't
Yeah.
actually have anything to do with doing my work.
Yeah.
But it's like I'll be completely in a different room in my office space thinking about how the dishes need to be done, which I think probably has a bit to do with my OCD, but um, I totally agree and couldn't agree more that it definitely takes all those things for me to feel organized to be productive with whatever that thing is. So,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, it's nice too. I It definitely is on my mind, especially if I'm at home working, that all those things are still going on. But Steph and I do a good job of splitting up tasks. So like at night, I'm doing this, I'm starting the dishwasher, blah, blah, blah. In the morning, she wakes up and she puts the dishes away. So like we've done a good job of finding these routines that we have and then just making sure that we're both doing them. So. that helps too. But
No, I'm totally
uh
with you. How are you
but
feeling kind of going into the new job? I don't know what transition you were just about to make, but how are you feeling about your preparedness that starts tomorrow? Like, do you work a full day tomorrow, or what's the schedule going to be like?
yeah, I start like 11 a.m. I think is what it is. Feel pretty good. I got my laptop, I got my phone sent to me now, so I just gotta finish doing like the setups for those. The laptop I'm not supposed to open until we actually get on the first call, so it'll be good. But I feel pretty good. I feel like I know what I want to get out of this. I know what I'm focused on. I didn't get to do as much of like the prep work of focusing on like the books that I'm reading and how to break it down and what I want to be learning mostly, but I still know what I want to get out of this and what my goals are personally. So I feel good about it. I keep realizing that I'm like overtired. Like this morning, I slept 11 hours last night. I slept like probably 10 hours yesterday and the day before that too. Just like, I don't know, I feel like my sleep bank was very depleted. So I've just been passing out and kind of felt tired throughout the day then. So it'll be good now that I'm gonna get back into the routine of things and just be like, all right, I have to go to bed at 10 p.m. I have to get up at 5:30. And Steph and I have been working on that too, like just making sure we go to bed together at that time because if not, it just throws us all out of whack. So,
Do you think how much do you think that your busy brain has played into that overtiredness? Obviously, you've been having a lot of, you know, mental stuff going on with preparing for this new job and transitioning out of your old job. What do you think
yeah.
is the biggest reason for some of the overtiredness?
Yeah, I think for me, one, I've been drinking a lot more than what I typically do and like staying late at night.
Sure,
Um,
it's hilarious.
the other thing is the consistency with sleeping. I have not, it's been like one day it's midnight, I go to bed. One day it's 10 p.m. One day it's 3 in the morning or later, you know? So that's been killing me. And then the other thing is just the food I've been eating. I definitely know I have not been eating the right things. Steph and I kind of got away from doing some of the meal prepping that we do because we got sick of the same meals. So that's actually one thing I got to figure out too is um, what foods we're going to be meal prepping from now on for like a couple months or a month at least. I want to get kind of more into the Mediterranean, like more raw foods, stuff that has color to it, stuff that makes you feel good. So,
It's so crazy to know, to recognize how much all of that different stuff plays into sleep, especially. I know we both kind of went down the rabbit hole with breathing and then with sleep specifically. Like we both have the Whoop straps. I don't know how much you've been keeping track, and it definitely
yeah,
varies for me because I've been tracking my sleep data for probably 5 years now, like maybe more. I used to have the Aura Ring for a few years and then I honestly switched to the Whoop because you had it and I started kind of like wearing rings in general. So like the Aura was just kind of throwing that off. But I'm to the point now, and this is maybe just has a bit to do with laziness and me not wanting to check the data, but it's like I'm doing everything that I know I can be doing. Like I know exactly what the formula is for me to have a
yeah,
great night's sleep. And that's a combination, like you said, of the food I'm eating, hydration, the kind of mindfulness and wind down practice before I go to bed
yeah,
at night, the time of day that I'm waking up, the consistency with my bedtime. There's just kind of like this checklist of all the different things I need to do in order to feel my best. And as
yeah,
soon as I don't do those things, I know that the data is going to say that my sleep sucked.
yeah,
So
exactly.
maybe it's just a bit of avoidance on my part. Like I'm not going to check it because I know it's going to give me a bad score, or I haven't
Yeah,
charged it in a few days, but like that's fine because I know that I haven't been sleeping that well. So it's just there's a direct correlation, which I think is funny, and I'm sure you've recognized as well with the things you do and how it actually impacts sleep.
for sure.
And I learned that a lot, especially on vacation, because I kind of can turn the busy brain thing off. I have a pretty good practice, especially when I'm on vacation, of winding down, try to not have as much screen time in bed as I would maybe at home.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. It's just crazy how I had so many question marks about it for so many years. Like, well, why can't I get such good sleep? It's like you're
Yeah.
eating 30 minutes before you go to bed. Like you're going to bed super late. You're sitting on your phone for an hour before you go to bed. Like all
Yeah.
these little things that stack up. So, I don't know. It's just interesting to see how the data actually reflects your practices. It's funny how that works.
I do think it's interesting too what you mentioned because I never would have thought of this before was just like the mindfulness piece. Like I notice if I don't take time, like where I sit in the sauna and like I know the sauna is good for you, but I really think the piece with the sauna that does the best work for me with sleep is the fact that I'm completely unplugged and I'm in my head. And it's more of like a meditation time than it is even like I'm sitting in the sauna and I'm sweating my ass off because my sauna doesn't get that hot, but it's like I'm sitting there, I'm thinking about life, I'm thinking about what I need to do and like breaking down things. And I think it's one of the like most clear times for me to think. And I notice if I'm not doing that, like at least 3 times a week, especially like five, like I can tell there's a very different type of sleep that I'm getting and um, just how I feel throughout the day too.
At the end of the last podcast, you'd mentioned about getting back into your meditation practice a bit. Can you talk a
Mhm.
bit about maybe even sauna aside, just talk a bit about like your mindfulness practice? Like, what does it mean to you? How do you do it? And
Yeah.
what is kind of the outcome versus when you do and don't?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, the main ones that I focus on, especially with it being hot out, like I go by the water. The water is like very peaceful for me. I'm a Pisces, so I'm a fish. I grew up on the bay. Like I typically say if I have to jump in the water every place I go just to know if I truly like it. Because like I like that even when it's cold, I like getting shocked by the water too. So I'll take some time to sit by there. Like yesterday, I went by the lake for a couple hours and then um so doing those two things, praying is another time for me too. Just like um I think a lot of people with prayers too, it's more so like some people probably use it more as a meditation. I use it kind of as like a mantra time of like saying these are the things I want or like these are the things that I feel like, with me working out, I'm stronger, like favorability, those types of things. So those are like the main practices I do. So, oh, journaling is a big one. I haven't been journaling as much anymore, but with that though, I consider like setting my goals with that too. Um, and even like writing my tasks for the day, I consider those partially journaling as well. And it just helps you focus when you're looking back at those and you're thinking about this constantly of playing through all these different things that you want in your head, it makes you know where you're going and you don't feel like so anxious about the day. You don't feel so anxious about where you're at or like what's happening in life because you understand that you're in this, timeline of, okay, I'm going from here and at some point I'm going to get here. But I know that these are the things that I need to consistently do every day or each week that will get me closer to that thing. And at some point, you even kind of forget what that thing is that you're chasing because you're so focused on that middle piece of doing those things consistently. And then you're not worrying so much about what the end result is. So, how do you feel about like what is it for you?
I think that's super well said. I think I've been thinking about it a lot since you brought it up last podcast because there was a period for probably a year and a half that I was extremely consistent and I was extremely intentional about writing down everything I was thinking. I was really
Yeah.
in tune with like my meditation and being able to organize what was going on in my head. And I think as soon as I got into the you know, hustle of everything with my business and meeting Caroline and how busy that I've been, I lost some of that just because it's so
Hmm.
much easier to be intentional about those things when you feel like you need something out of it, which is something I've been trying to get away from. Like I want it to be something in my life consistently, regardless of what stage I'm in, who I'm around, what's happening with my business. and anything like that. So I think the way that you explained it is perfect because for me, it's just a way to verbalize, process, and digest the million things that go on in my head.
Yeah.
Something that I've told you about, and I can't remember, have you ever gone in one of the float tanks yet? I think you did, right? So, and it at like a float tank, I think is the most extreme version of it in trying to get from one end of a thought to the end of it, or
Hmm.
the beginning of a thought to the end of it. And with journaling, and when I was like recording those voice memos to just talk through some of the things out loud, I think the most important part is to see it, to process it, and to give your chance and to give your brain a chance to file it away. Um, I think that we juggle so many different things, and it's so easy to, you know, let incomplete thoughts bounce off each other without
Yeah.
truly being able to process it. That being able to just sit alone in your thoughts, allow yourself to get from the beginning of a thought and then move on to the next one is super important in figuring out what some of our goals are, personally and professionally. So, from a journaling perspective, I think a few episodes I talked about the most productive version of journaling for me is when I just sit down and I just write everything that I'm thinking about. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be anything specific to my business. It doesn't have to be anything specific to, my relationship or anything personally going on. It's just like, let me write down everything that's in my head and then immediately go down to the next thing and just kind of keep
Yeah.
going until I feel like I've gotten through it. Because I don't know. It's really hard for me to process some of those things because I'm so used to just going from one thing to the next. And
Yeah.
if I go weeks and months and years without being able to fully process some of those things,
Hmm.
I get busy brain, I get overwhelmed. I find myself like having this brain fog and really not remembering things as good as I could. Like I've always
Yeah.
said, which I don't know if this is scientifically true, but the more things that I take on, I feel like my brain starts kicking out things that it feels like aren't of use,
Yeah.
which I think is sad to say. Like, I don't want to start forgetting stuff because I have, you know, a client that's taking up so much of my brain
Yeah.
or anything like that. So I've been trying to be more intentional this past week, especially just from like a breathing perspective. I have like a lot of different practices between journaling and meditation where I just like to take a moment and I like to focus on the breath. I like to kind of go down everything that's around me. I like to like take note of the things that are in the space, the noises that are surrounding me, and then getting back to my breath to the point that I can kind of X out everything around me and then start to file away specific thoughts that I haven't been able to previously.
Yeah.
Um, and then from the float tank perspective, first of all, think everyone should do that at some point in their life. I think it's like the
For
best
sure.
the best thing ever for anyone that doesn't know what it is or its purpose. It's really the only way to cut out all of the senses because it's something that you can't do just from straight meditation. Like if you were to sit on a chair, you still have the sensation of feeling the chair that you're sitting on. You can still
Hmm.
hear the things around you. If you open your eyes, you can still see the things around you. But in the tank, you can't see anything because it's pitch dark. You can't hear anything because you're in a tank and there's no sounds.
Hmm.
Um, you can't feel anything to some capacity because the water is supposed to be the same temperature as your body. So if you can fully get still, it cuts out your ability to feel things, thus allowing you to completely be in your own head. And like I said, start filing away the thoughts and giving you opportunity to not be interrupted by the chair you're sitting on or the sounds that are in the room. So I haven't gone as consistently as I used to, and it's kind of expensive, so I think that plays a bit of a role, but I think everyone should have a version of that in just sitting with their thoughts and try to fully process what's going on without letting the things around you distract those.
Yeah. For sure. And I know one, I agree with you completely. Like, I think everybody should do that. And for a lot of people, the float tank is like the scariest thought ever, is to
Yeah.
just sit completely in their head. And I think that's exactly who needs to sit in the float tank then. if you're having those thoughts. I think the relief that you get once you fully go through it, like I've heard a lot of people be midway through it and they leave because they're freaking out. I think if you sit in there for that full hour and you get through that piece of like, my gosh, this is the scariest thing. There's so much going on. Once you get past that, you'll start to come to a lot of those revelations that you're talking about of like, oh, now I feel at peace. Like when I walk out of there, it is the most peaceful that I've felt in, till the last time I did it or till I had a crazy moment of being in nature and totally disconnected. So I'd recommend it for everybody. And then two, could you talk a little bit more about like your breath work? I know we've both read a book called Breath by James Nestor on it. Just talk a little bit about like what you mean by that. What do your practices look like? What is optimal for breathing? Those types of things.
Yeah, I don't think I know as much about like specific breathwork techniques as some people do, but I think the underlying theme with any sort of meditation practice is to focus on your breath.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously, in this podcast and in a few other the ones that we've done, I wear these nose strips. I know you and I have both went through a few surgeries between the two of us to try to get
Mhm.
um, our nasal breathing better than it already is. But it's always just been a way for me to bring myself back to center. And the beginning of my meditation practices was through the app Headspace, and there's a whole bunch of different variations of types of meditation for different times of the day, for different feelings that you're feeling. But every single one of them, the foundation of it is focusing on your breathing and specifically nasal breathing, in my case, in your case. Um, Through reading that book called Breath by James Nestor, which again I recommend to everyone, pretty much learn to avoid mouth breathing like the plague. Like
Yeah.
you'd never know how many different benefits nasal breathing has.
Mhm.
I think that there's like, the stigma, like, oh, these mouth breathers, whatever. But especially at night while you're sleeping, while you're exercising, and then for me, just throughout the day, like it's a profound difference in how I feel when I completely cut mouth breathing out.
Yeah.
So we do the nose strips. I know you do the same. I mouth tape at night, which has completely changed my sleeping patterns. I've always had these issues waking up with kind of like dry lungs, dry mouth, and then also just feeling super groggy when I wake up.
Mhm.
And I can't super explain the science like the book can, but I know that there's filtration through your nose based on how the oxygen's taken in that impacts how your lungs process the air and then how that translates to the different impacts of
Yeah.
the body, especially while you're sleeping. And I mean, I've seen it a ton on TikTok now too, that it like impacts your jaw shape and like all of these
Yeah.
cosmetic benefits as well. But I, even as I lose touch with specific breathwork practices and following something guided, like on Headspace, for example, it's usually just 10 breaths in and out, strictly through my nose. That is harder than I sometimes expect. Like when I'm out of my mindfulness practice and I just want to sit down and take 10 breaths, in inhaling is one, exhaling is two.
Yeah.
Like you'd be so surprised how hard it is for me to get to 10 without being distracted by something.
Yeah.
And I think for me, and maybe you can relate to this, that's what makes it so hard to get back into meditating or to like focusing on my breath after I haven't done it in so long, because it seems like such a feat. I'm like, I can't even get to 10 without getting distracted, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But you talked about the sauna too. For years, that's where I would really learn how to dial in my breath and kind of get inside myself while I had so many distractions around me.
Yeah.
And I think the breath is always at the center of that.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know if you have any specific techniques. I didn't take a ton from that breath book of away I didn't take a ton away of actual breathwork practices. Like I've gone down the Wim Hof rabbit hole before, and I don't know there's like specific breathing patterns that do certain things to the
Yeah.
mind, but none that I know enough to speak about.
So for me, like the main takeaways I had with that, and you talking about hitting 10 breaths. What I try to focus on is the optimal breath. So the optimal breath is 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. So like if you look at religious hymns too, the length of those hymns is 6 seconds. And so that's when you get to be, like I said, in the optimal state. So what I try to do is when I focus on breathing, like in the sauna or whatever when I need to calm down, it's just 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. And then I'm not focused on like that outcome. I'm just focused on like the process of it.
Mm,
So that's typically what I try to focus on. The other main takeaways I had from that is just like you were saying with facial structure, all those things. Like the Native Americans would close their babies' mouths and to make sure they were fully breathing out of their nose, and that's why they have like wider faces and they have way better nasal passages. It's just because your nasal passages are something that can always grow, and no matter what age you are, your face in those passages can get stronger. A lot of that is like through eating raw goods or like raw, not raw meat, but like, you know, le less well done meat. Just making sure you're chewing actually, because you think of in the past, it would take them maybe 6 hours to eat meals until we started cooking food. Now it's under an hour. Now everything's processed and it's soft. So, that biting, and like that's why those jaw exercisers are such a big thing now, is just to strengthen that and then just breathing properly. Um, There was one other main takeaway I was going to mention too, but I can't think of it now. But yeah, so I just try to focus on that optimal breath, and then that allows me to. Oh, the other piece was this. A lot of people think when you're like super stressed or anxious or just in a hyper state that you need to just breathe through it. The main takeaway that I learned from that is if you're feeling uneasy, to stop breathing. You want to hold your breath as long as you can until you're forced to take a breath. And then you can do like the double inhales. So think of like when you're a kid and you're just crying your eyes out. One, you feel like you can't breathe for a while, and then you go and you like do that double inhale and you start to calm down. And that's how you can force your body to go into what it naturally should be doing to calm you down, and just skip that piece and you'll start to calm down a lot. So like even when I was going into that interview and I started to feel stressed or whatever, I just stopped breathing for as long as I could and I felt so much better. So
yeah, which is good context. I'm glad that you can remember some of that stuff because I think between the two of us, we covered some of the high level elements of the book, and just to even get a bit more into it, I what I love so much about it was I know that you and I have very analytical brains. So for context, for anyone who might be interested in reading that book, the guy that wrote the book and is kind of like the primary storytelling person throughout the book is, I believe, a Stanford grad, or I don't know what his
can't
Stanford
remember.
affiliation was, but he was going throughout these trials where he went through a certain period with having his mouth taped 24/7 and only breathing through his nose except to eat and brush his teeth and whatever. And then he swapped to block his nasal passage and only mouth breathe and did all these scientific tests throughout the process to see how different breathing techniques transitioned into physical and mental health, all while telling stories on different ailments that someone got healed through nasal breathing, or like the Native American tribe example that Trent gave. So it's not just like a book about, breathing techniques and explaining its benefits. It's really going through the process to help you understand what these different breathing techniques do to the body, how they've
Mhm.
impacted different groups of people, ultimately helping you recognize what's best for you in the end. So again, highly would recommend the book to anyone interested in going down that rabbit hole.
For sure. Wanted to jump into, I know we talked about few things last time. You had that big presentation. I know that can kind of transition us into, you probably were a little nervous for that. Can you kind of walk us through, what was that? Walk us through the presentation, how you felt going into it, how it went, those types of key takeaways that you had.
Yeah. So to give some context, I think on the last call, I had talked about working on a project and with a client with a mentor of mine who has kind of slowly been easing me into his process and specifically getting me up to speed with one of my biggest struggles as I make this transition of not being able to quantify the work that I'm doing since I've just been doing the work for so long. So
Hmm.
I kind of walked through what his process is, and we were working on the client facing deck together and breaking down the problems and opportunities that we were finding ultimately to give this presentation to the VP and some of the higher ups for this client that we'd be working with. And I was a bit nervous about it, but I don't even really think I was because this process has come so naturally that I've really been eased into it.
Yeah.
So I think the stage on our last call that we were at was I was working through some of the problems and opportunities and building the slide deck, including visuals to explain to the client what these issues were. In going through that, I think there was 25 or 30 different opportunities that we'd found that I
Hmm.
had to fully process and then figure out what the best way was to explain to the client what it was. So for my process, um, I don't necessarily know how detailed I need to get about that, but in preparing for the presentation, I don't know. The preparation wasn't like that significant. Like Graham and I just went back and forth on the slides, how they looked, me making sure that it was a good representation of the business and how the business usually speaks about some of these issues. But ultimately, just kind of going into the project and or going into the presentation and just speaking on what I know. Like
Hmm.
we went through some of the issues which were extremely technical, but we had a variety of people on the call. I believe it was the VP, and then there was like a marketing executive, and then their primary developer who we'd essentially be handing a lot of these tickets over to be doing the fixing. So as much as it's a presentation, the way that he briefs his clients and like the how they expect the engagement to go, it's a lot more of a conversation than it is a presentation. And I think that that's super important to do when you're creating these relationships with these clients. Like we're doing, which I think is a the way that he does it, which I think is super unique, is he does these audits for clients for free.
Hmm.
So it's not a sales pitch, but it is kind of a way of saying, we just did all this work, we found all these issues, here's how these issues could improve your site. Let's talk about some solutions. And usually, as much work as it takes us to do the audit, it always pays off because they're finding stuff that their internal team typically can't. So I think like I don't know, I think of it less like a presentation and more just like a conversation of us going into what our findings are and how we might be able to help them fix some of those issues. So I think that that plays the biggest role in feeling confident about it and going through it naturally.
So, with you saying that it's more of a conversation and having prepared this deck for them and also doing it with Graham, can you kind of talk about like, what was the role that he's playing in the conversation? What's the role that you're playing in the conversation? And how does it transition from, so many people think when you make a deck, you just have to read what's off the deck. How does it turn to an actual conversation? And, what is the client or the prospect, how are they getting involved with the conversation? How is Graham initiating that or you initiating that with them?
Yeah, so I think the visuals that we include play a big role in that. And like I said, just how the relationship is set up, I think makes that super easy. And with how the decks are structured, play a role too, because we're not just dumping information onto the slide to like over explain to the client
Hmm.
what the issue is. We're putting 2 to 3 sentences total on the slide with a visual and then explaining it because we know what the issue is. Like it's not just an automated process of us dumping this issue onto the slide without giving them context on um, what the issue is and how it's actually going to improve the performance of their site. So we're typically asking them questions. We're saying, here's what we found. Do you have this configured this way? And is there a reason for it? And if not, is there
Mm,
any roadblocks that prevent us from doing X? Often they're saying, we didn't even know that was an issue. What would it take for us to fix that? And going back to the imposter syndrome thing we talked about in the last call, you know, we've dealt with enough clients and we have enough experience to say, you know, here's what the effort level is on this issue and here's how much it will move the needle. So in every one of these slides,
mm,
we have a little chart that shows effort level and then impact. So that's how we organize the priorities that we're giving to them. And me and Graham actually talked about this a bit yesterday because as I'm learning his process, one of my questions to him was, what is your process for determining priority as we're finding these issues? Which I understand to some extent, but like some of the things that we're finding are just so complex and things that are impacting tens of thousands of pages and so many different things that play such a big role in the performance of their site. I'm like, well, how do I quantify this being higher on the priority list than this? And he's like, I don't really have a good answer for you. Like that's just experience based. Like I just
yeah,
have done this on a client site before and saw what happened. And I'm in the position where I have the expertise to recognize this is going to move the needle and this isn't. Um, and it's hard for me to discern sometimes. I talked about this on our last call when we were talking about my transition a bit. I have such a well-rounded experience in SEO now that depending on the client that I'm working on, an issue that's significant for one client and will greatly impact their performance for one client won't even do anything to another client.
yeah.
So it's just experience based. It's just understanding um, what the priority of some of these issues are and then explaining to the client how that will move the needle and why it should be prioritized.
Got you. So it sounds like one, you're bringing like a consistency to the visuals and the structure of the outline of like very simple, here's the main things you need to focus on, not word vomiting. And then it's showing with the visual of, here's where we're at, the difficulty level and the impact, but then consistently showing that so they can see like, okay, these are the things we probably should focus on. But then it sounds like you're using this technique of like I it reminds me of this book called The Challenger Sale. So you're bringing the problem and challenging them on like, okay, how is this affecting things? Why did you do this? What's your plan to eliminate some of these things? Or like what's the end goal that you want from that? Those types of questions to get them to probably do a lot more of the talking. So then they look at you as more of the consultant and the person that they can help solve their problems. Because then it's going back to, well, we didn't know that's a problem, or we didn't know this. We didn't plan for that. What would your recommendation be on how to fix those? Should we even focus on that? And then it puts you into the perspective as the actual expert that can come solve those problems. Is that kind of how you would explain it?
Totally. And something that I've given Graham kudos on before too is it's hard sometimes in these presentations where you're coming in essentially to a team and just saying, here's a bunch of problems your site has. Often it's stuff that they already know about and they don't have a fix for, or they don't think they have a
Yeah.
fix for, but it's because they haven't had a consultant of our stature that says, okay, so you thought this was the only solution, but actually this is a solution as well. And what given Graham kudos on is like the way he brings these issues up and the way that he lays it out for the client is
Mhm.
so good that it like prevents any defensiveness from the people that are taking the issues in. And I mean, even on this specific call, there was just something that got brought up that was impacting a whole lot, and you could tell like the developer that was on the call was kind of starting to get defensive because they were going to say, well, we tried to do this and this didn't work. And then just the way that he kind of talked them down and explained to them what the issue and like what the fix could be, you could kind of see their guard come down and see them kind of be on his side. So if you're taking the side of being like, we're all on the same team here, like we're not just
Yeah.
trying to sell you on these issues and these fixes so that we can get some business from you. The
Yeah.
relationship I feel like is so much better because they let their guard down and they're
Yeah.
recognizing that we're working together. So that's just kind of like a thing that comes with experience and a bit of a personality thing as well, because what I've said a few times is he's amazing at dumbing down some of these issues from being super technical to being something that they can understand. Like, this is a significant issue. This is how, like, financially it might be impacting the business. And it's not even just SEO stuff either. Like, often he comes with recommendations that he's found just from his experience that make them be like, okay, so this guy knows this stuff for real and doesn't just have like an audit checklist that he's presenting us on. So
Yeah.
that's been super good for me to learn from, and it's definitely something that I'm gonna try to do with future clients as well.
So it sounds like a couple things are happening here. One is like you said, he's going in the framing of we're in this together. So he's figuring out a way to not point fingers more so than anything. It's more like this is a problem that anybody could face. You probably just haven't seen the solution to that. It also sounds like he might be giving solutions to things that, like you said, you guys won't fix, or maybe giving recommendations on how they could fix some of these problems on their own so that you guys can focus on the things that you should be focusing on. Um, and then could you explain a little bit about like how, especially when someone's being defensive, how he approaches that? Like, because people take pride in their work, especially developers are going to be like, we're doing everything we can, blah, blah, blah. We've tried this, we've tried that. How does he, like, one, go straight at that problem and allow them to understand that he's not trying to attack them in any sort of way?
Yeah. I Again, I think that's a bit of a skill, but I think it's just setting it up from the beginning like, hey, we're here to help. And a thing that you had just mentioned, and rather than us framing it as if we're coming in to try to fix things, we're
Yeah.
framing it as we're going to help the development team fix the things. So often we'll have these long-term engagements with clients that we don't ever even go into their site. We're often writing agile development tickets to lay out what needs to be done so they can process and make the changes on their own
Mm,
because we have the experience with how the ticket should be created, what specifically needs to be done, even to the coding or to the theme or to specific elements of the site to make those fixes. Instead of us just saying, hand us the keys, let us log in and let us just do this stuff on their own. You'll find that like once you get on their good side, they just want you to do it. Like depending on the relationship and depending on the client, they're like, we have the development team, but they don't
yeah.
always digest stuff as good as they could. So they'll just give us the login and let us do the work on our own. But that
Wait,
definitely
so
varies.
I need to hit on one thing right now. So, you guys are coming in as like a consultant on in a lot of spaces, exactly how you just explained of like you guys are just telling the development team how to fix certain things based on expertise. I know with Polaris, you've had issues in the past with consultants. How do you feel like the difference is compared to those consultants compared to what you guys are doing?
Man, God, I think about this so often. Um, And we'll get into this too. It's something I want to talk about as we talk about or as we get into our takeaways from rewatching some of these podcasts is I'm going to tread a little bit lighter about talking about some of these specific things while I'm still in the mix, kind of just to cover my grounds. But
Okay.
this one isn't an issue I don't have any issues talking about this one because even my
Yeah.
team's open about it. But like I've said before, like there's really levels to this consulting stuff. Like
Hmm.
There's so many agencies that exist, especially from an SEO perspective. Since we have so many tools that can crawl websites and tell you what the issues are, it's
Yeah.
so easy to just regurgitate those tools and like fake provide value to
Yeah.
businesses of any stature. So businesses like Polaris, a lot of different businesses that want to outsource SEO work with these agencies because they're the experts. They have all these tools, they're up on industry trends. They're
Yeah.
supposed to be able to come in and kind of give us the sauce. But I would say 95% of agencies, even the biggest ones, don't really provide the value that they think they do. And since I've worked on the agency side, I've worked in-house and I've done the consulting thing. I have a pretty wide range of experience with SEO in different, types of industries with different sides coming,
Yeah.
especially working with Graham. Like I talked about this in the last call, I've seen Graham take on clients that typically have SEO teams of 10 to 12 people. So it's just a matter of trimming the fat, understanding what's really going to move the needle, and then, cutting the BS and what's delivered to the client. Like we always have these issues where there's a lot of tiptoeing. Like we pay, at Polaris, for example, we pay these agencies a ton of money, I think, to avoid having to hire people in-house because it's supposed to be more bang for your buck, like they have a dedicated team at this agency of 5 to 6 people that are working on our account specifically and have a vast experience and vast value to provide. But I think that often gets in the way when working with these enterprises, because they're not in-house, they don't understand the work that's actually being done behind the scenes, and we're just kind of like they're just kind of filtering through and they're funneling through a bunch of different businesses, providing the same high level recommendations as close as they can, and
Yeah.
then kind of shut their laptops off at the end of the day and don't really think of it past that. But as you know, it's been a significant frustration of mine because in addition to the work that I have to do as an in-house SEO, I also have to manage the relationship of the agency that we work with. So it's definitely given me a lot of ideas of what not to do. And
Hmm.
luckily, I've had good people in my corner from a mentorship perspective that I can learn what can be done and how it
Yeah.
can be done to manage the relationship with the client well, but also like provide value. Like without getting too technical with it, there's a big spectrum of doing stuff that actually will move the needle for the business. And then there's stuff that's just packaged pretty to seem like they're providing value when it's not actually the case. So learn
Yeah.
by experience.
It sounds like kind of going back to what you were talking about with Graham in this last meeting and like what you guys are focused on is one, laying out what's there, and then two, actually talking through a lot of the pieces that you have, where it sounds like the other agencies are kind of just trying to rinse and repeat and not be very specific about what it is that you specifically need and like how that affects the business overall. It's more of this high level, yeah, do this, do that, but they're not actually understanding what the real team is doing and what they're doing to try to make some of these changes and talking through like and thinking deeply about what the problems are. It's more of just, yeah, do this, it'll work. Try this or throw this at it. And then them saying like, oh yeah, we fixed all these things and maybe it had nothing
Exactly.
to do with them.
Yeah, I've dealt with that firsthand. I know that I've talked to you about being a pretty specific frustration where, again, they kind of claim this fake value that they provide. The business sometimes gets wins on our end, but not directly correlated to the things that they're bringing to the table. And I've had some
Yeah.
instances where it's stuff that I've personally done that agencies have taken credit for, which absolutely drives me crazy. But again,
Yeah.
that's kind of why that's just another driving force in me getting out of that world and me applying
Yeah.
what I now know from working with those agencies, but then doing the consulting stuff my own way to understand how to best provide value for the client, how to stay organized on my end, and how to recognize what actually is going to be of value to the business based
Yeah.
on what they're paying me for and what I'm dedicating my time to each month.
Yeah.
So
It's
learning as
good
I
that
go.
you it's good that you have that perspective though too, because I mean, I think a lot of people that end up doing sales in some capacity or um, get in a position like yourself where you're trying to provide value. Like I know this was the problem with my own business in the past. It was just like we didn't listen to anything people were telling us or even try to find out. It was just like, yo, this is what we think's dope, or this is what we think will work, and you have no understanding of what they actually need because they'll tell you if you create a space where they can tell you. So it's good that you have that perspective and you know both sides of it. Um, but yeah, I know we're here at an hour now. Um, and I think this is kind of a good stopping point as well. I feel like we touched on a lot of important things today. I think this is probably one of our better ones. It's interesting how they keep getting better and better as we go. So I know that was something we wanted to talk about, was just kind of what we noticed from listening to the past podcasts and just like wanting to talk about where we want it to go as well. But I feel like this is a good stopping point, and maybe that's something that we should focus on next time as well.
Yeah, I agree. I was looking at the time too, and I'm like, maybe we can squeeze it in, but I think we can have a long-term discussion about it because, yeah, obviously
Yeah.
living and breathing it, especially as I'm doing the editing and stuff, is giving me a lot of insights to where it started and where it's going. So let's put
Yeah.
a pin in it.
For sure. Well, appreciate the time as always, and I know you got a little bit left of vacation, so you enjoy yourself, and we'll get back to it next week.
Yeah, I appreciate you, brother.
Also,
Episode 5.
like and subscribe.
You got that. You got that. Like and subscribe. Episode 5.
All right, see you, man.
Bye, bro.